By rights, it should be a place this channel would never cover. A country where no formal war is currently taking place and no civil conflict rages. But while Haiti may not suffer the same problems as Ukraine, Yemen, or Syria, that doesn't mean it's at peace. Ever since the July 2021 assassination of President Jovenel Moïse, the Caribbean nation has been swamped beneath an ever-growing tsunami of violence. Violence that has seen armed gangs seal off the capital and occupy 60% of its territory. One that's seen kidnapping, murder, and sexual violence become so commonplace that people cannot leave their homes. One that, in October 2022, saw the Haitian government do something highly controversial: beg the international community for an armed intervention. In the 3.5 months since, that controversy has only increased. On one side, there are those who argue that a short incursion is the quickest way to restore order, to let ordinary Haitians resume their lives. On the other are those who see it not as a solution, but the gateway to a military quagmire. In today's episode, we're both analysing the thorny issues surrounding armed intervention in Haiti and trying to figure out if the international community has any other choice. As surprise requests go, they don't come much more surprising than the one made by Haiti's government on October the 8th, 2022. Signed by Prime Minister Ariel Henry and 18 cabinet ministers, it implored the international community to send an armed force into Haiti to restore order. Not doing so, Henry asserted, would risk a major humanitarian crisis. At time of recording, in early January 2023, the prospect of an armed intervention is very much alive. The Biden White House is trying to gather a coalition of willing nations from the Americas. There's been talk of Brazilian involvement, Canadian. The Dominican Republic, the nation that shares the island of Hispaniola with Haiti, has demanded action. But while the arguments swirling around intervention will form the crux of this episode, we first have to answer an important question. Why? Why is Haiti in a position where its own government is calling for a foreign force to enter its territory? Well, the answer lies in a series of interlocking crises. Crises that on their surface seem distinct, but really have a single root cause, a single poison root strangling Haitian society. A root marked political collapse. On July 7th, 2021, President Jovenel Moïse was gunned down in his residence in an assassination so brazen that it shocked the world. Yet the president's murder was only the latest twist in an already pretty twisted story. Prior to Moïse's death, Haiti hadn't had a single election since the much-delayed presidential vote of 2016. The 2019 deadline for parliamentary elections had sailed by without anybody visiting a polling station. Instead, President Moïse had used his time to hollow out institutions and amass power. His death left a vacuum at the heart of an already creaking system. It was into this vacuum that Ariel Henry stepped. The Prime Minister, Henry, had been appointed by Moïse just days before the president was killed. This had already caused a crisis of legitimacy. With no sitting members, Parliament couldn't confirm Henry's appointment, nor was he elected, meaning he couldn't claim his own mandate. So when Henry was elevated to acting president after Moïse's death and then cancelled the already delayed elections, it turned a political 3 Mile Island into a metaphorical Chernobyl. As 2022 got underway, Haiti was being led by an unelected leader heading a weak, hollowed-out state in which a mere 10 senators out of 30 could still claim an electoral mandate. Of course, political paralysis alone isn't usually enough to trigger calls for armed intervention. Belgium famously went over 650 days without a functioning government in the late 2010s without ever begging its neighbours to send in the tanks. The difference is that Belgium's political crisis saw local governments still fulfilling basic functions. Haiti's saw the state effectively vanish. In Port-au-Prince, a lack of sanitation has meant trash piling knee-high in the streets. Across the nation, stopped food deliveries mean up to 4.7 million facing acute hunger, over 40% of Haiti's total population. Of them, as many as 20,000 are in danger of literally starving to death. Then, in September 2022, state subsidies on fuel were slashed, pushing people deeper into desperation. Haiti, you see, doesn't have a functioning electrical grid. People instead rely on generators for power and pumping clean water. Generators they can only afford to run on heavily subsidized fuel. With water pumps unable to run, people were forced to start drinking contaminated water. This led to an explosion of cholera. By the end of 2022, 10,000 cases have been recorded. Awful as all of this is, though, it's still somewhat outside this channel's remit. We're Warographics, after all, not humanitarian disaster graphics. Sadly, though, there's another aspect to Haiti's chaos that relates more to what we do. Something that puts this Caribbean nation in the rare and unfortunate club of potential subjects that we can cover. We're talking about the grimmest side effect of the collapse of the Haitian state, the concurrent rise of Port-au-Prince's brutal armed gangs. Like many nations, Haiti has long had issues with armed gangs, but the collapse of state authority has turned what was once a pressing problem into a kind of national nightmare. As the Haitian state receded, up to 200 gangs moved in to replace it, many of them equipped with military-grade weaponry. By mid-2022, they're taking control of the roads leading from Port-au-Prince, effectively blockading 1.5 million people in the capital. The land around the Parliament building was seized, becoming a no-go zone. All told, some 60% of the Haitian capital is now ruled by gangs. And with their arrival has come a tidal wave of violence. In the first 6 months of 2022, nearly 1,000 people were murdered in Port-au-Prince. The third quarter was even worse. Between June and September, another 1,377 were killed or disappeared, including 500 who died in the vicious battles to control the capital's roads. Kidnappings likewise surged. From January to October alone, over 1,100 civilians were snatched for ransom. Things got so bad that many now simply stay home or sleep at work to avoid going on the streets. As you'd expect, that enforced lack of movement has had dire consequences. Trapped by fear, Haiti's people have been unable to leave their homes to buy food or even visit hospitals when ill. There are reports of families having to choose whether to take their sick children to a doctor and risk getting kidnapped, or stay home and risk their child dying of cholera. At the same time, the gangs have stopped shipments of basic supplies from entering neighborhoods, exacerbating already dire conditions. As bad as the deprivation is, though, it's the random violence that's most troubling. Across a single week in July, for example, armed gangs descended on the Cité Soleil slum and wreaked havoc. The door-to-door massacre saw perhaps 300 killed, with many, many more wounded. Nearly 4,000 fled the slum. With nowhere else to go, they were forced to simply sleep in makeshift tents on the hard ground of a nearby plaza, a shanty town of despair, right in the heart of Haiti's capital. For many, though, this was the better outcome. And just a quick warning here, the next minute is going to get pretty dark, and we did consider skipping over this bit, but it's necessary for understanding just how truly horrendous things have become in Haiti, for why the government might invite an armed intervention. As the gang's power has increased, they've turned increasingly to sexual assault as a terror weapon. The massacre in Cité Soleil was accompanied by the mass rape of at least 50 women and girls. The National Human Rights Defense Network recorded 20 cases of mothers being raped in front of their children. This wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a deliberate strategy to inflict humiliation on anyone who might cross the gangs. There are reports of some gang members filming themselves raping women in the streets in broad daylight, then sharing the footage on social media. That broad daylight part there, that's key, because it shows the complete impunity that these young men feel. Not simply because they're the ones with the guns, but because the gangs are entwined with Haiti's institutions. The National Human Rights Defense Network notes most gangs have serving police officers among their members, with some even using police cruisers to carry out kidnappings. Port-au-Prince's worst gang, G9, is actually run by an ex-policeman, Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier. But it's not just the police the gangs are working with. Many have ties to Haiti's political elite. In both government and opposition, wealthy patrons use these armed groups as a kind of thermostat for the nation, turning the white heat of violence up or down just as it suits them. In return, these politicians force judges to turn a blind eye to even the most horrific abuses carried out by gang members. Yet it's not as simple as the elites merely controlling the gangs. As the power of Haiti's armed groups has grown, the question of who is controlling who has gotten more complex. Rather than one sponsoring the other, it might make more sense to think of them as toxically codependent. This, then, is why Haiti's violence seems so intractable, why the government felt compelled to cry for help. The big question now is, will anyone answer that call? In the end, it was the blockade of the Veru terminal that did it. In September, the G9 gang seized control of the terminal building, the main one in Port-au-Prince, through which fuel for the city's generators normally flows. For 2 months in autumn 2022, though, nothing flowed out of that terminal. Overrun by Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier's men, it ceased to function. As the New York Times' correspondent noted, by taking out the terminal, G9 had, quote, put the entire country in a chokehold. The shutdown that followed saw Haiti tiptoe to the brink. It was during this period that cholera took off again, triggering the current outbreak. For our purposes, though, it was what happened on October the 8th that really matters. Faced with out-of-control gangs and a collapsing state, October the 8th is the day Ariel Henry made his call for help. Although Haitian police managed to retake the terminal in November, that call has yet to be rescinded. If anything, pleas for intervention have grown only louder. On December the 11th, President Luis Abinader of neighboring Dominican Republic joined the chorus, telling the Financial Times, the international community needs to be more responsible. If it's really concerned about Haiti, it needs to go and help there. 10 days later, the UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed urged countries to consider Haiti's request for armed help. By then, though, the ball was already rolling. Mid-October saw two of Haiti's biggest neighbors, the United States and Mexico, draft and sponsor a joint UN resolution on military support for Henry's government. Not long after, the US joined with Canada to unveil sanctions against two elites said to be linked to the gangs, including the sitting president of the Haitian Senate. For the US, this flurry of activity has an obvious endgame: to prevent what White House officials have privately called the government's biggest nightmare, a wave of small boats carrying tens of thousands of desperate refugees to American shores. Haiti lies less than 700 miles, or around 1,100 kilometers from Miami. Every year, the US Coast Guard intercepts boats carrying Haitians, but last year saw an explosion. Between October 2021 and September 2022, over 7,000 Haitians were detained at sea, a number 4.5 times bigger than the previous 12 months. Washington's fear is that a total collapse in Haiti would act as a multiplier all over again. Yet the Biden White House still is not committed to sending troops, and maybe with good reason. After all, none of America's previous 3 interventions in Haiti played out as they were supposed to. American forces entered Haiti in 1915, 1994, and 2004. In all cases, their goal was to restore order. In all 3 cases, things soon wound up getting unbelievably complicated. Taking place in the wake of a different presidential assassination, the 1915 intervention ultimately saw the US occupy Haiti for over 19 years, an era that left a traumatic legacy. The twin interventions in 1994 and 2004 were likewise difficult, with America initially entering Haiti to undo a military coup and to put deposed President Jean-Bertrand Aristide back in power, before returning 10 years later to take him away into exile, a move Aristide later called kidnapping. As well as fanning turmoil in Haiti, something all 3 interventions have in common is that they wound up damaging America's reputation. Hence the current hesitation about adding a 4th intervention. But it's not like anyone else has a good track record. From 2004 to 2019, the UN kept its own multilateral force in Haiti, known as MINUSTAR and led by Brazil. It likewise became embroiled in damaging controversies. The biggest of all was the accidental importation of cholera, leading to an outbreak that killed over 9,000 Haitians. But MINUSTAR troops were also accused of the sexual abuse of local women and girls. All this is why everyone, from ordinary Haitians to generals in the Pentagon, are today very wary of armed intervention. At the time of recording, it's over 3 months since Ariel Henry made his plea, and still no foreign troops have arrived. But let's put aside these worries for a moment and instead pivot to a pertinent question. What would a new armed intervention in Haiti even look like? Thanks to semi-recent interventions in the Middle East, it's easy to assume that going into Haiti would be a gung-ho mission involving airstrikes on gang hideouts and troop storming beaches. If an armed coalition does enter Haiti in 2023, though, it's unlikely to look anything like that. Rather, the plan would probably hew closer to what UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres described as deploying a rapid action force. Consisting of special forces personnel from multiple nations, this rapid action force would not operate under an official UN mandate, although it would have the body's blessing. Designed to be nimble, it would have few members, with US officials suggesting a total of 2,500 elite soldiers involved. And it would have an extremely clear mission, one which wouldn't involve attacking buildings or fighting in core gangland territory. That mission? To secure Haiti's ports and airports and take control of vital roads that would allow the rapid distribution of food, water, fuel, and medical supplies. The idea would be to not even try to crush the gangs, but instead provide relief to the suffering population, to allow the movement of goods, to alleviate hunger and illness, while forcing open channels that would get the economy moving again. This in turn should open up enough room for ordinary Haitians to begin living their lives once more, to go to work or to take their kids to school without worrying that they might be killed or kidnapped on the way. As reporter Nick Kristof summed up to the Times' Argument podcast, success in Haiti is going to be measured by enough tranquility that people can actually live their lives. This tempting vision, one most of us could probably get on board with, but it's also one that currently faces problems, not least who could lead it. With the UN's name still mud in Haiti, there needs to be a country willing to take the front role, to take charge of things like planning and control and command. But who? Even without its tortured history in Haiti, the United States is currently too distracted by the war in Ukraine and the potential for a Chinese invasion of Taiwan to commit to a mission in the Caribbean. But realistically, what other nation has the expertise and firepower? Mexico originally approached Brazil to provide the raw muscle. In November 2022, though, the government ruled out taking the leadership role. Also in contention is Canada, with Trudeau's government yet to categorically refuse heading an intervention. But Ottawa isn't exactly brimming with enthusiasm at the idea, instead preferring to focus on sanctions against politicians tied to Haiti's gangs. All of which may be why a full intervention isn't the only option on the table. Some are pushing for option B, letting the Haitian National Police lead the charge. Recently floated in Politico magazine by former US Ambassador to Haiti James B. Foley, this plan would involve doing for Haiti what the Pentagon is currently doing for Ukraine, providing weapons, equipment, and intelligence without resorting to boots on the ground. The idea would be to take more of a support role, giving the HNP the troops and the training that they need to clear the gangs from strategic points on their own. Unfortunately, it's a plan that would require heavy investment to get Haiti's police up to scratch. The HNP has been gutted in recent years, its entire national force reduced to just 12,000. By contrast, New York City alone has a police force of 35,000. The HNP is having to police an additional 3 million people with about a third of the manpower. And then there are the issues of corruption and gang infiltration. If the US could spend $83 billion training and equipping Afghanistan's forces to just have them crumble, what are the chances Haiti's police will transform into an elite fighting unit capable to defeat the gangs? Still, for now, those remain the two most likely options, either a serious effort to build up Haiti's domestic forces or a limited incursion by international troops to allow for the flow of supplies. Yet even these smaller goals are easier said than done. As the West found out in Afghanistan, even the most straightforward-seeming adventure abroad can easily turn into a quagmire. Now, so far, we've looked at both the problems besetting Haiti and the worries among nations most likely to lead any military action. But there's one important aspect we've not yet touched on: the divisions within Haitian society itself. From the outside, it's easy to see the gang-led chaos and Prime Minister Ariel Henry begging for help and assume things are straightforward, that Haiti is divided into those working with the gangs and those backing Henry's call for intervention. The reality, though, is that huge chasms exist between different parts of Haitian society. Failing to get all the groups backing intervention is a most surefire way to creating a quagmire. Perhaps the biggest chasm of all is the one between Ariel Henry and his government and the opposition group known as Montana Accord. Made up of political parties and civil society groups that oppose Henry's rule, Montana Accord is extremely influential and extremely against having foreign troops enter Haiti. Their primary reasoning is that the Haitian crisis needs to be a Haitian solution, one that comes from the country's streets rather than being imposed by an outside power. But they're also worried that military intervention could be used by Henry to illegitimately cling to power. Remember, this guy is unelected, demonstrably weak, and only still in power because he cancelled elections. If the global community sends in soldiers to restore order at Henry's invitation, they'd de facto be propping up his rule at a time when most Haitians are sick of him. It's not for nothing that tens of thousands took to the streets of Port-au-Prince to protest Henry's call for help last October. But even if the opposition were to somehow reach an agreement with Henry, problems will still remain, not least in defining exactly what victory will look like. It's all very well planning to only commit 2,500 troops toward a clearly defined goal like taking control of ports and reopening roads, but what happens when you've done that? What comes next? UN Secretary General Guterres suggested to the Security Council that the next step would be a smaller international force to back up the Haitian National Police. But how long would that last? And is anyone willing to commit to the open-ended program of funding and training that's needed to stop the gangs from rebuilding once the foreign forces leave? These are the sorts of questions governments are having to grapple with as they weigh up their options. At the back of everyone's mind is the fear that this limited incursion could easily turn into a multi-year occupation with just no end in sight. Of course, the best thing to do would be to use an intervention to tackle the root causes of Haiti's violence, the political and business elite who supply and work with the gangs. Dismantling this class of gangsters would certainly improve Haitian society. But, as we saw in Iraq, it isn't easy to just sweep away a powerful elite, especially when that elite has lots of money and armed men at their disposal. Nor is it likely that new elections will solve anything. Gangs use their influence to make people in poorer districts of Port-au-Prince vote the way their patron wants them to. Rather than a cleansing, a new vote may shuffle the same old corrupt elite around without really changing anything. The more you try to game out ways forward, the worse things seem to get. Going after the gangs directly is also off the cards, as they're embedded deep within local communities. That means any attempt to storm local gang strongholds could result in a lot of local men getting killed. And there's no better way to turn a civilian population against you than to start killing their sons and ransacking their homes. So that's kind of where things stand at the moment. A whole lot of bad options for anyone who leads an intervention into Haiti, but also the extreme likelihood of ever-increasing violence and brutality if the world simply sits back and does nothing. Honestly, it's a crying shame that things aren't more clear-cut, that we can't end this video with either a call for action or a stern warning against doing so. But then, that's life. It's complicated, offers no easy solutions, even when the suffering of Haiti's people seems to demand that we do something. But if there's one thing guaranteed to make things worse, it's acting without thinking. It could be that 2023 finally sees an international force enter Haiti. It could be that an intervention never even happens. All we can say for certain is that each path holds potential for trouble. We can only pray that our leaders think very coolly and very clearly about all possibilities before committing to any course of action.